I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're listening to Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
So, on today's episode of Eating W's, we have a little bit of post-draft news and just a little bit of a kind of post-draft recap. Just talking about some of the best drafts that we thought happened, some of the worst that we thought happened, and then looking a little bit at Cal and I's each respective favorite team. Me looking at the Vikings draft and Cal's looking at the Packers draft. But before we get to that, we got just a little bit of news here. Now that the draft is over, a lot of those older free agents that have kind of gotten left on the free agent market are going to start getting picked up fast. So we only have one today, actually, but I imagine by next week, a good portion of them will be gone, to be completely honest. So,
yeah, I think so.
Starting off with today's news, we got that the Arizona Cardinals wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins was hit with a 6-game suspension for going against the NFL's PED policy, performance-enhancing drugs. Now, usually I'd make a joke about spin-the-wheel suspensions, but this does kind of actually seem to be one of the few things the NFL is consistent with.
Yeah.
I mean, usually when guys get hit with the PED stuff, no matter what severity, it's usually a 6-game suspension. So it makes sense. I'm kind of surprised because DeAndre Hopkins is a bigger star. Usually you see some of those more middle-of-the-pack guys get hit with the suspensions, and some of the other guys kind of maybe get off a little bit because of their stardom and their pull, but they got Hopkins.
He said he took a supplement that had one of the banned substances in it, and he wasn't aware of it. But he dropped his appeal, so he's just kind of admitting to it and taking his time.
So it'll be interesting to see because they already re-signed AJ Green before the draft. They'll probably sign one of the receivers who are left on the free agency market, maybe one like Julio Jones. That'd be kind of a cool tandem to see with AJ Green and Julio Jones. And then you'll also probably see
a Madden team.
Yeah, for real. You'll see guys like their 2021 rookie Rondell Moore start getting a lot of looks in those first 6 games. So.
And that trade for Hollywood Brown now makes a lot more sense.
Oh, and I totally forgot about Hollywood Brown. That does make a lot more sense. Wow, yeah, that totally crossed my mind. So maybe they won't sign another guy, to be honest, if they already have AJ Green, Hollywood, and Rondell Moore.
And one thing is that if you remember, DeAndre missed the last 5 games of the season last year, so he'll now miss 11 straight games.
Wow, yeah, he did. So they've already done a little bit of work without him, so that's crazy. So moving on to an extension, the Falcons signed defensive tackle Grady Jarrett to a 3-year extension. A lot of sense there. One of the best young defensive tackles in the league. Total beast in the middle there. Great extension for them. And then finally, for the one older guy signing that I mentioned earlier, the Saints signed safety Tyrann Mathieu, which is a good pickup for them too. I mean, they already got Marcus May and C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Marcus May in the offseason, they already had C.J. Gardner-Johnson. So it's nice to get a little bit of an older presence there with Tyrann Mathieu.
They lost Marcus Williams, so they needed a veteran presence there.
Yep, certainly. Okay, so now we will move on to some of our draft recap or kind of post-draft reaction. So I'll start it off here, and I guess we'll start it off with none other than the Minnesota Vikings. Now, I get it's Kwesi's first draft, and the actual players that we drafted, I actually really like all the players we ended up getting. But, with some of the players we left out there on the board, and especially the roller coaster of trades we made, some of them being god-awful and some of them actually being pretty damn good, it was a whirlwind of a draft for the Vikings. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of their draft, at the 32nd overall pick in the first round, they got Georgia safety Lewis Cine, who is a guy who I think can step in and replace Harrison Smith pretty well. Maybe this is just me being a Kyle Hamilton fanboy, but I don't think he can replace him near as well as Kyle Hamilton could have. But he will still be able to replace him well, and I kind of like the prospect of Lewis Cine. Favorite thing about him is on draft night I kept hearing this guy's a heat-seeking missile, and I was like, he can't be. This man is a heat-seeking missile from that safety position.
He's a hard hitter.
He can come up and lay a boom, to say the least. And then we got an absolute steal of Andrew Booth in the second. This is a guy who I thought we could have traded back into like the early 20s, and like kind of in my prediction before the draft is I thought we could have traded back to the early 20s and got this guy in Andrew Booth and still been pretty good. But we ended up actually getting him at 42 overall in the second round. So I was really happy with that pick. Then we went a little questionable with Ed Ingram, who's a guard out of LSU, which I love the position, but I think it's just a little bit of a reach taking this guy out of LSU. And some of the other guys we picked up included Brian Asamoah, a Caleb E. Evans, who is actually a corner that I think might end up being really good, and then a few other just positions of need. We got a defensive end in the 5th, and we got a wide receiver and a tackle in the 6th, and a tight end in the 7th. So just a lot of depth stuff. The only pick that I'm looking at that I'm really like, wow, I don't get that one, is in the 5th round we got Ty Chandler, a running back out of UNC. I didn't see where we were going there. We already had Cook and Alexander Madison, and then we already had Kenny Nwangu as kind of like our
third down
guy or gadget guy. God, I cannot think. Like a gadget running back return guy. So very questionable there using a 5th round pick on Ty Chandler, but we'll see if maybe he can prove me wrong. What did you think of the Packers draft?
I really like the Packers draft. They tackled positions of need and areas of need. With their first 2 picks, they went with 2 defensive players from the national champion Georgia, just like the Vikings did with Lewis Seen. They went with Quay Walker, the inside linebacker, and even though some thought this was a reach here, I think it was perfect for him. His player comparison is Devondre Campbell, who he'll line up with, and then he also played over 500 snaps on special teams. So he's a special teams ace, which is what Green Bay needed, is to rebuild their special teams. So they literally drafted a backup linebacker and a special teams guy with the first pick, and that is how you tackle your areas of need.
You look at that roster, and special teams was about the only position of need, so I mean, I guess it makes sense.
Yeah. And then with their second first-round pick, they went with Devontae Wyatt, a defensive tackle, nose tackle, who could line up behind or play with and behind Kenny Clark, who really needed someone to give him a breather at times because Tyler Lancaster just wasn't cutting it anymore. Which, no offense to him, he was a solid player, but he was just getting beat too much, just not athletic enough. And this guy is definitely athletic enough that he could step in and won't miss a beat without Kenny Clark. And then with the second pick, graciously enough from the Vikings, who gave us this player, we took Christian Watson, the wide receiver at North Dakota State, who we had as, reports say, as the number 1 receiver. So that's perfect. On our draft board, we had him as a number 1 receiver. We were able to get him in the second round.
You can keep going on that.
Okay. And then with the third round after that, we took an offensive lineman, Sean Ryan, and I don't really know much about him. I know that he is a true junior. He's one of the younger draft picks that were taken, and he is very versatile. He can play guard or tackle. And then we took another wide receiver, Romeo Dobbs, out of Nevada, who's Carson Strong's best top target. So that's something that I like. He's a deep threat. And then we took another offensive lineman, Zach Tom, a tackle, guard, center. He literally played all 5 positions, similar to Elton Jenkins. So he's kind of a poor man's Elton Jenkins, so that's perfect. And then we took Kingsley J.J. Anagburi, the linebacker out of South Carolina. And this is a pass rush specialist. Now, he didn't have a whole lot of sack numbers, but he was number 2 in the nation in total quarterback pressures. And that's very big because he is going to replace Zadarius Smith in the rotation. And one of the best things Zadarius Smith did was able to pressure the quarterback. So hopefully he can fit in right there without missing a beat. And then we took a number of special teams guys, from Tariq Carpenter out of Georgia Tech, a gunner and special teams ace, Jonathan Ford from Miami, who also was a star on special teams for Miami, and then Rasheed Walker and Samari Torrey, another wide receiver out of Nebraska, and an offensive lineman out of Penn State. So adding some depth to that to the offensive line and wide receiver room. I thought it was a great draft, and I think that it's going to prove that Goody hit this one out of the park.
Certainly. I really liked your guys' draft, too. I mean, I think that the Vikings did well compensation-wise in the trade that we made with Green Bay early in that second round, but giving you guys your main position of need and an absolute beast who I think could be a future superstar in Christian Watson. Very questionable there, but I really like your guys' draft. You got a bunch of special teams guy, which is probably your biggest area of need, and just a lot of depth at positions that you didn't really have much depth at before. So definitely good to get that there. So now we will jump on to who we think had the worst draft, and I'll start this one off. And I think the team with the worst draft in 2023 was the Miami Dolphins. Now I know that's a little bit unfair to the Dolphins saying they had the worst draft, considering they only made 4 total picks in the entire draft after trading most of, if not all, their capital away in a few key trades this offseason. But I mean, that's kind of why I'm giving them the worst draft, is they didn't have much to do, and they didn't do much with what they had, if you ask me. So starting off, they didn't make their first pick until the third round at 102 overall with Georgia linebacker Channing Tindall. Now this guy is pretty much a Jerome Baker clone. And don't get me wrong, Jerome Baker is a really good player. He's a really good linebacker. I like him. But a defense doesn't really need 2 linebackers like that. Oh, no, Rosie. The defense doesn't really need 2 linebackers like that who are kind of those sideline-to-sideline guys. So it's just a little confusing to me that that's the first thing they jumped at right there. And then with their next pick, in I believe the 6th round, let me find it. No, the 4th round rather, they took a wide receiver, Eric Akuzma, out of Texas Tech. And I mean, where most of their draft capital went this offseason was to the wide receiver position. So out of only your 4 picks, I don't know why you use your second top one on a wide receiver to add to that. A little confusing there. And then they didn't make another pick after that until the 7th round, where they made 2 picks in the 7th round and picked up an outside linebacker out of Cal and Skylar Thompson, the quarterback out of Kansas State. And again, you finally hit a position of need, an edge rusher with the outside linebacker out of Cal, but you don't get him till the 7th round, so I don't really know what you're going to expect out of him. And then you say you're going to go with Tua, and you already got Teddy, and you end up taking a quarterback with one of your only 4 picks in the 7th round. So I know that they didn't have much to do or much to move around with, but I'm just mostly confused by the positions they took and how they used their picks.
Yeah, when you're in the position of Dolphins where you really have to take quality over quantity, and they did not get very good quality for their quantity.
No, and they aren't really, or at least last season weren't really a playoff-ready team in my opinion, so I'm surprised that they did all this stuff in the offseason and then had kind of a poor draft. I think they kind of dropped the ball on that one.
A little bit, yeah, especially with the wide receiver moves, because they signed 2 of them in the offseason and traded for Tyreek.
Yeah, exactly.
And even though they did trade Devontae Parker, but still, I just feel like there was other areas they could have went with to draft.
Yeah, really threw me through a loop on that one, Miami did.
So for who I think has had the worst draft class is, and we touched on it a little bit, but I think it was the Minnesota Vikings. And not so much based on who they picked, but their trades of dropping 20 spots down from 12 to 32 to not only pick a safety when Kyle Hamilton was available, but you traded to the Lions and gave them Jameson Williams. And then in the 2nd round, you traded to Green Bay to allow them to select Christian Watson. And so you're giving 2 divisional foes possibly their future number 1 wide receivers. So I guess it's just, I don't know, payback for all the Randy Moss torture. I don't know. So they finally felt bad. I don't know what it is, but I think that those moves alone is just a very bad look on a draft class.
Yeah, certainly. That Lions pick, God, I could not believe. Or sorry, that Lions trade, I should say. I could not believe that Lions trade. I mean, we moved back 20 picks in the 1st round, only to move up. I think it was like 12 picks in the 2nd round, and then get a 3rd rounder out of it. When you got a desperate team like the Lions trying to move up that many picks, you got to run them. You got to get a king's ransom. You got to run them for all they're worth, and we just didn't. If anything, they got just as much, if not twice more value than we did, which you just can't have that in the situation. We had the upper hand in that situation, and we let the Lions easily take it from us and get Jameson Williams. And if you saw our live reaction to the drafts, I was not laughing about it then because I was still absolutely shattered by the Vikings trade. But Jameson Williams' reaction to getting drafted by the Lions was the funniest part about the draft.
Nobody talks about that.
It was hilarious. You could tell from the second the camera hit him after Goodell said his name that he did not want to be a Detroit Lion. You could see it in his face. I don't even think...
he didn't think Detroit was going to be the team.
No, I don't even think that... I think that poor kid would have rather had to wait to the second round than have to go to the Lions. But I think that could change.
Oh, yeah, it'll change when the money hits.
You know, I know Jared Goff isn't the best quarterback, but that's a actually really promising future team. And now they have a really good young receiving core that's going to give him a lot of one-on-one looks. So I think his attitude towards the Lions might actually change a little bit. But man, was it funny that night. But sorry to get off topic. But yes, I don't think... Like I said earlier, I really like the players we got. I don't think the Vikings had the worst draft player-wise, like... draft class wise, but I think we definitely had one of the worst drafts trade wise because we made some bad trades. We made some good ones too, but we made some bad ones, so I agree. So now we'll save the best for last and move on to who we thought had the best draft, and I'll start with the Baltimore Ravens. Now, if you want to see why the Baltimore Ravens had the best draft, you can just look at their first round. I mean, they get safety Kyle Hamilton at 14th overall, somebody who at one point could maybe be a top 3 or top 5 pick, and he falls to them at 14. And they're able to move back in and get Tyler Lindenbaum, the center out of Iowa, who was easily the best center in this draft. That's a hell of a first round, and neither of these are positions that need upgrade now for the Baltimore Ravens, but they have a pretty well-rounded roster to the point where they didn't really need to target these positions now, and their only position they really needed to target was edge rusher, and they ended up getting that in the second round with David Njabo, who was going to be a middle of the first round guy, but then injury had him fall to the second, and they got an absolute steal in him as well. So great first 2 rounds for them. And then they
also picked up Daniel Falele.
Exactly. And then in the third round, they ended up getting Travis Jones, the defensive tackle out of UConn, who is another guy that people thought he might go first round.
Pick. They got 4 first-round picks.
And then, as Callan just mentioned, in the fourth round, so all the way to day 3, they got Minnesota tackle Daniel Falele, who was somebody who also could have been a first-rounder at one point in a lot of mock drafts and a lot of analyst eyes.
He fell really
He fell big time, and they ended up getting the riches of him falling that far. And then they got, let me count this, they took 6 total players in the fourth round.
Yeah,
just through trades and stuff. So they got a lot of fourth round picks, and they got a guy in the 6th round too, in Missouri running back Tyler Batty, who is kind of just taking a swing on somebody late, but maybe it'll work out.
Well, with their running back injuries last year, he'll be their starter by week 2.
Literally, dude.
So.
The only pick that the Ravens made that kind of got me thinking was they picked Penn State punter Jordan Stout at, I believe it was 130 overall, when San Diego State punter Matt Ariza, who is literally named the punt god and one of the best punter prospects I've seen in a while, fell to 180. So they took the Penn State punter while Matt Ariza was still on the board, which really confused me.
It has to do with the hang time. The Ariza's punts, they go so far, but they don't have any hang time. I guess Jordan Stout was able to put a lot of hang time.
I guess that makes sense.
So that made it so where he went above him,
But yeah, that is literally just nitpicking one little bad thing about what I would consider almost a perfect draft class. So great job by the Ravens.
And then for my best draft class, I'm going to talk about the team in New York. No, not the Jets. Everyone's talking about the Jets. So I'm going to pass over that. And I'm going to talk about the Giants, who with their first two first-round picks got 2 number 1 overall picks in Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal. And because at some point during the season and during the offseason, both of these guys were looked at as the consensus number 1 overall pick.
Pretty much, yeah.
And the Giants were able to get 2 of them in the same draft. And not only that, but it was also positions of need because they needed an edge rusher and they needed to protect Daniel Jones, and they got one of the best prospects to protect Daniel Jones. Now, they did reach a little bit in round 2 with Wan'Dale Robinson, but that guy is a scat back, wide receiver, kick returner. He will make plays, and he can score from anywhere on the field. And then they also took a little shout out to a little homer here, but they took Dane Belton in the 4th round out of Iowa, who was known as kind of that tweener, that linebacker, safety type. So they got it. And I like that they were able to bring another Hawkeye into the NFL.
Gotta love it. Yep. So I think that is all we have for today's episode. Where's Rosie? Rosie! If you want to see why I've been running around and
Rosie
talking
girl!
to anyone but the camera this whole time.
And now she's gone.
Now she's gone, of course. But I was getting Callan's dog. I just wanted to show her off in a little bit because she's a little cutie. And
Rosie!
to say why I've been not paying attention.
Here she comes.
Here she is.
Come here, girlie.
This has been this episode's distraction, brought to you by Rosie, this little troublemaker.
Rosie girl, the Frenchie.
But just wanted to kind of clear that up, why I've been running around. Keep watching Eating W's to next week to get more draft analysis, and soon we'll probably be kind of preparing for the season. So
Yep.
might as
Training
well,
camp's right around the
might
corner.
as well start turning that leaf. So thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, don't forget
To eat the W. Jesus Christ, Rosie.